For years, I carried the silence like a stone in my chest, heavy and unmoving. It had been almost 8 years since I heard from my sister, Emily. 8 years of birthdays, holidays, funerals, weddings, each event coming and going like a train I wasn't allowed to board. She wasn't there. No explanation, no goodbye, just a thick, unbreachable wall of silence that she built brick by brick with every unanswered call, every ignored message. We used to be close, once. Childhood was a shared territory, secret forts built from old sheets and broomsticks, whispered dreams in the dead of night, matching skinned knees from chasing each other through the fields behind our house. Emily had a laugh that would peal through the air like bells after rain, sharp and sweet. I used to think there was nothing in the world she couldn't tell me. Then something shifted, slowly at first. Missed phone calls, last minute cancellations, birthdays forgotten. I tried not to panic. She's busy, I told myself. Life happens. But then months turned into years. Invitations to family gatherings came back unopened. My texts remained unread, little green bubbles of hope floating into a void. I grieved her like a ghost. I turned the memories over in my mind like worn coins, losing their shine each time I reached for them. And then, one rainy Thursday night, she reappeared. The storm was rattling against the windows, smearing the world outside into a gray watercolor. I was curled up on the couch, a threadbare blanket around my shoulders, the TV murmuring some documentary I wasn't really watching. My phone buzzed once on the coffee table. Just once. I almost didn't check it. Almost let it sit there like every other meaningless notification, but some ancient, stubborn thread inside me pulled my hand toward it. Unknown number. Hey, it's Emily. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred. My heart kicked against my ribs, a wild, clumsy thing. The edges of the world seemed to tilt and sway. Is this real? I whispered into the empty room, as if the silence would answer me. I debated replying. I debated hurling the phone across the room. 8 years of silence could not be stitched up with two words. But still, my thumb hovered over the keyboard, trembling. Is it really you? The reply came almost instantly. Yeah, I'm sorry. Can we talk? Talk. As if the last 8 years were just a bad dream we could shake off. I said yes. We agreed to meet at a diner on the edge of town. Somewhere neutral, she said. Somewhere we wouldn't be haunted by too many memories. The next day, I arrived early. The place smelled like burnt coffee and frying bacon, the kind of clinging, greasy warmth that soaked into your skin. Rain streaked the windows outside, warping the neon signs into bleeding, colorful smudges. I picked a booth near the back where the cracked, red vinyl seats were patched with duct tape and ordered a black coffee I barely touched. Every time the bell over the door jingled, my stomach twisted. And then she was there, older, thinner. Her once vibrant auburn hair was now muted, pulled back into a limp ponytail. Dark circles ringed her eyes like bruises. Her jacket hung off her shoulders as if it didn't quite fit. But it was her, no doubt. The same tilt of the head when she scanned the room, the same cautious smile when her eyes finally landed on me. She slid into the booth across from me, her hands tucked tightly into the sleeves of her jacket, like a child. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The noise of clinking dishes and low conversations filled the space between us. Finally, she broke the silence. I'm sorry, she said, her voice cracking on the word. I'm so sorry. The anger I thought I'd let go of years ago surged up in me like a fire. I opened my mouth to lash out, but all that came out was a choked, broken whisper. Why, Emily? Why did you leave? She looked down at her hands, twisting them in her lap. It wasn't you, she said. It was everything. Me. I was falling apart, and I didn't know how to ask for help. It was easier to disappear than to explain. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to reach across the table and hold her hands like we used to when we were scared. But the years had built walls around my heart, and I didn't know how to tear them down anymore. She told me about the spiral, the bad relationship, the financial ruin, the shame that swallowed her whole, the feeling that she had become unrecognizable even to herself. She said she thought about calling me so many times, but every day that passed made the chasm wider until it felt impossible to cross. Tears slipped down her cheeks, and she didn't bother wiping them away. I listened. I let her words soak into the cracks, though they stung like salt. When she finally fell silent, looking at me with that small, pleading expression, I realized something. Forgiveness isn't a thunderclap. It's a slow, grinding thing like glaciers moving. It hurts. It's ugly. It doesn't come all at once. I missed you, I said, my voice raw. She broke then, her face crumpling as she cried, and for the first time in almost a decade, I reached across the table and held her hand. It was cold and trembling, but real. Solid. Here. We sat there for a long time, two battered souls trying to find the broken bridge between us. It wasn't perfect. It would never be perfect again, but it was a beginning. And sometimes beginnings are enough. The days that followed were cautious, like learning to walk again after forgetting how. We started small. Short texts, awkward phone calls. At first, it felt like talking to a stranger who just happened to share my childhood. But sometimes, when she laughed a certain way, or when her voice softened at the end of a sentence, I caught glimpses of the sister I had lost, like shafts of sunlight through heavy clouds. One evening, about a week after that meeting at the diner, Emily asked if I wanted to go for a drive. Like we used to, she said, her voice shy through the phone. I said yes, even though every part of me quivered with fear and hope tangled together. She picked me up in an old battered car that coughed and wheezed when she started it. The passenger seat smelled faintly of mint gum and something metallic, maybe old coins. As she drove aimlessly through the back roads, the town unwinding into open fields and thick woods, the memories started to bleed through the present. I remembered when we were kids, piling into our dad's rusted pickup truck. Emily would always call shotgun, and I'd sit in the middle seat, squashed between her and the door. We would press our faces to the glass, watching the world blur by, inventing stories about the people in the houses we passed. That one's a secret witch, Emily would whisper, pointing at a crooked farmhouse. That one's a time traveler, I'd say, and she'd giggle until she hiccuped. Now, as we drove, the radio played some old song, half lost in static. She tapped the steering wheel absently with her thumb. I watched the way her hands gripped it, white-knuckled, tense. I realized rebuilding trust was not like flipping a switch. It was like trying to learn a song you used to know by heart but had forgotten half the words to. You could hum along, but the gaps were painful. At some point, we pulled over by the old river, the one that used to be our whole world. We got out without speaking. The air was thick and humid, smelling of wet earth and honeysuckle. The river moved lazily, reflecting the last burnt orange scraps of sunset. I looked over at her, unsure what to say. She shoved her hands into her pockets and kicked a stone into the water. You remember when we tried to build a raft here? She asked, a small, almost embarrassed smile tugging at her lips. I barked out a laugh, surprising myself. You mean the death trap made of fence posts and garden hose? She laughed too, and for a second it was like no time had passed at all. I closed my eyes and the memory flooded in. Emily and I, no older than 10 and 12, wrestling with broken wood and soggy rope, our sneakers sinking into the muddy bank. We were convinced we could sail all the way to the ocean. We launched our ridiculous raft with a whoop, and it immediately flipped, dumping us both into the freezing water. We had come home soaked, bruised, and laughing so hard we couldn't breathe. Our mom had been furious, but even she couldn't stay mad when Emily wrapped herself in a towel and made pirate jokes all night. Standing by the river now, I felt a dull ache deep in my chest. I missed this, Emily said softly, almost to herself. Me too, I whispered. The sky deepened to a bruised purple, stars blinking open like tiny wounds. We sat down on the grass, still damp from the day's rain, and talked. Not about the missing years. Not yet. That wound was still too raw. Instead, we talked about little things, movies we had seen, people from school, silly gossip about our old neighbors. It wasn't perfect. There were long, awkward silences that neither of us knew how to fill. There were moments when I caught a flicker of pain in her eyes, and I knew she was remembering things she wasn't ready to say. But there was also laughter. Real laughter. Shaky and fragile, but alive. And slowly, the river between us seemed a little less wide. As the night grew colder, Emily pulled her knees up to her chest and said, in a voice so quiet I barely heard her, I thought you'd hate me. I wanted to, I admitted. Sometimes I still do. She nodded, swallowing hard. But mostly, I said, looking out over the dark water, I just missed you so much it hurt. She wiped at her eyes with the sleeve of her jacket, like she used to when she was little, and pretending not to cry. We sat there in silence, not holding hands, not hugging, just existing together. Two people trying to stitch a broken thing back together with fingers still bleeding from the attempt. And for the first time in years, I thought maybe, just maybe, we could. Maybe we were like that raft we built, clumsy, broken, a little ridiculous, but somehow still afloat, carried by a current bigger than either of us. Hope, I realized, wasn't a loud thing. It was quiet. It was a flicker in the dark, a hand reaching out even when you were terrified. And for now, that was enough. The next night, I almost didn't answer when she called again. Part of me wanted to keep things light, to skate across the surface, to pretend the deep parts weren't still churning underneath. But another part, a braver part maybe, knew we couldn't stay in the shallow end forever. When I picked up, her voice was shaky. "Can we talk?" she asked. A pause. I mean, really talk? Something in her voice told me it wasn't going to be easy. We met at the old park we used to haunt as teenagers. It was almost midnight. The whole world swaddled in damp darkness. The playground equipment stood like skeletons in the moonlight, rusting and half forgotten. I found her sitting on the swing set, her sneakers dragging slow trenches in the wood chips beneath her. I sat on the swing beside her. Neither of us moved for a long time, just the metal chains creaking softly in the breeze. Finally, she said, "I was jealous of you." Her words dropped like stones into the silence between us. "I thought you had everything figured out. College, friends, mom and dad always bragging about you. You were shining, and I felt like this broken, useless thing standing in your shadow." I sucked in a sharp breath. Part of me wanted to deny it, to tell her it wasn't true. But I remembered. God, I remembered. The way she would shrink back when our parents praised me. The tight smiles, the hollow congratulations. I had seen it then, but I had been too wrapped up in my own world to understand. "You never said anything," I whispered. "I didn't know how," she said, her voice cracking. "And then when I started messing up, dropping classes, dating people I shouldn't have, I felt like every mistake made me smaller in your eyes, like I wasn't worth saving." The words gut punched me. A memory bloomed unbidden. Emily at 17, standing in our kitchen, screaming at mom and dad while I stood frozen, arms crossed, judging. She had been slipping even then, flailing, and I had let her drown in my silence. "I'm sorry," I said, tears burning my throat. "I should have seen it. I should have done something." She shook her head violently. "No, it's not your fault. I chose it. I chose to disappear. I thought I could punish you by cutting you out of my life, make you feel the emptiness I felt." A sharp, bitter wind cut through the trees, rattling the dead leaves. I closed my eyes. There it was, the ugly, festering truth neither of us had dared until now. "You did," I said, my voice breaking. "You hurt me." "I know," she whispered. I hated myself for it. I looked over at her then, really looked. She sat slumped on the swing, her hair tangled by the wind, her face pale in the moonlight. She looked like a ghost of the sister I once knew, but also something stronger, a survivor, battered but not broken. Another flashback surfaced, unexpected and vivid. We were little, maybe 8 and 10. I had fallen off my bike, blood pouring from a gash in my knee. I had screamed for mom, but it was Emily who came running. She had torn the hem off her favorite shirt to make a bandage, pressing it to my knee with her small, trembling hands. She didn't care that she ruined her favorite shirt. She didn't care that she was crying harder than I was. She just wanted to stop the bleeding. Back then, she had known how to save me. Now it was my turn. I reached over, touched her hand where it gripped the chain of the swing. "I don't know if I can forget," I said honestly, "but maybe I can forgive. If you stay this time, if you don't run when it gets hard." She nodded, fresh tears slipping down her cheeks. "I won't. I swear." The swing creaked between us, back and forth, a slow and solemn rhythm. We talked for hours after that, about the ugly years, the betrayals, the loneliness. We tore open the old wounds, cleaned them out, and let them bleed in the cold night air. It hurt like hell. But underneath the pain, something fragile and beautiful was stirring, a rebuilding. Not the naive closeness of childhood, not the polished, picture-perfect relationship we once thought we had to have. No, this was messier, realer. Two battered hearts, stitched back together with the threads of honesty and forgiveness. The moon hung low and heavy in the sky by the time we stood, our bones stiff and cold. We didn't hug. We didn't need to. There was a new, raw understanding between us now. something no words could name. We walked back to the car side by side, our shadows long and tangled together on the cracked pavement, and somewhere deep inside me, for the first time in years, the stone in my chest cracked, just a hairline fracture.